because a big part of the population is opposed to this mining operation. I love my people. I love you, my dear brothers. This mine is not the only source of prosperity for North Sulawesi.
Since then, he's changed his mind. He is no longer opposed to the mine's entry into production, and yet he was right in 2007. The population of the region doesn't need the mine economically. It was only to create about 100 local jobs, and the gold of Tocotindung will surely not stay there. It is estimated that since antiquity, 165,000 tons of gold have been extracted from the depths of the earth, about 70% of that amount since 1950. About a third of the gold has been lost. Another third is conserved in the form of jewelry or art pieces. The rest is hoarded today by states and private owners. The French alone own somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 tons of gold. They're nest eggs in the form of coins and bars, and they're kept stashed away. If we melted all of the gold in the world into a single unique block, we'd have a cube of about 20 meters on each side. Gold is a unique raw material. It's the only product that is accumulated. The others are consumed. Gold, then, has a very particular life.
For a long time, it was a raw material. Let's say in the second half of the 20th century, it was a raw material. It had actually dozed off a bit in the 1981 in France, after the end of the oil crisis. Interest rates rose, the gold market slept, and it was no longer a raw material for jewelry and so on. Most analysts, until very recently and still today, consider it exclusively a raw material. But we're beginning to see that this is no longer the case, because recently gold has been leading its own life. Its price soars in euros and dollars, despite the fact that the dollar may suddenly gain or lose value. So I'd say that gold is becoming a currency.
As in 1944. At the time of the Bretton Woods Agreement, the United States held 3/4 of the planet's gold reserves. Exchange rates were then fixed according to a standard: gold. $35 for 1 ounce of gold. But in 1971, the American reserve of gold was dwindling fast, and fearing he'd have to redeem the US dollars in circulation for gold, President Nixon ended the convertibility between dollars and gold. That was the end of the gold standard. Ever since, it's been chaos among currencies, and gold has lived its own life. The price of the ounce has doubled in 4 years and gained 30% last year. Gold has become reassuring again.
The true motive, the deeper motive behind the current rise in gold, is essentially the loss of trust in the world's financial and monetary system. So gold has again become a refuge value. It's very interesting to see that during the period known as the subprime crisis, the top refuge value was the dollar. Next, we noticed that a lot of dollars were printed for reflation, and a lot of companies were nationalized. So gold started climbing again. And then during the second crisis, when there were doubts over the ability of states to pay off their loans, the dollar was no longer a refuge value. Clearly, gold became the only refuge value.
As wealthy speculators seek to reassure themselves with massive purchases of gold, the fishermen of Amalta win their first victory. The Indonesian Environment Minister has had the wisdom to refuse the initial plan, which was to dump mine tailings into the sea. But storing the poisonous waste on land also represents serious dangers. In the region, volcanic activity is intense, earthquakes are frequent, and flooding, made worse by deforesting the mining zone, is often devastating. Directly threatened by possible seepage, just next to the mine, there's Tangkoko National Park. It is home to numerous protected species, including endangered ones, such as the crested black macaque. Or even other smaller primates, tarsiers. Having appeared 45 million years ago, they fascinate tourists the world over. They even served as inspiration for Spielberg when creating E.T. There are only a few hundred left between the Philippines and the island of Sulawesi. Another source of concern for the population is the water. Gold is one of the top water-consuming industries. In order to extract 1 gram of gold, 50 tons of water are needed. The water tables that provide drinking water to the inhabitants of the region are not inexhaustible. Between the licenses that were issued, contested, withdrawn and then reissued, the hostility on both sides grows. The fever rises, as does the price of gold. On the side of MSM and Archipelago, there are even more intimidation and manipulation tactics. On the opposing side, there are demonstrations and lawsuits.
Over the past years, when the people in the vicinity of the mine succeeded in resisting and preventing the mine always struggled along. And it came to a point where on the international side, the banks who agreed to provide credits also retreated from that promise, due to the people's interference.
That is a victory for the Indonesians opposed to the mine. Under pressure from the demonstrations and hounded by NGOs that remind them of their ethical obligations, certain banks, including big French banks, withdraw their shares from Archipelago. The company bled dry, then issues new equity. In early 2010, the Indonesian company Rajawali became its majority shareholder. Its founder, Peter Sondak, appears as the savior of Archipelago MSM. He relaunches the Toka Tindung project.
This very rich person also has a very strong political influence in Jakarta, so what can I say?
Peter Sondak knows how to make friends. The governor, who a few months ago had acknowledged his brothers in the fight against the mine, suddenly became extremely low-key. The alliance continues to fight. It sues the Environment Ministry, which issued mining permits. It deems this illegal. Complaints were filed at the KPK, the Anti-Corruption Commission, against certain senior civil servants. While awaiting judgment, the MSM cannot, in theory, operate. And yet, the beginning of the operation is still scheduled for March 2011. Let's not forget, the price of gold now exceeds $1,400. Return to London, to the World Gold Council. This organisation brings together the world's leading mining companies. It closely observes the fluctuations in the gold market. In the plush offices of Old Broad Street, in the heart of the city, they relish the flagrant rise in price, and the association members' virtually risk-free increase of wealth.
It's true, like, well, many commodities, there's no yield on gold. It's not a bond or a stock, so there's no dividend or interest rate. But then that's true of any metal. So the drivers for understanding gold and other metals are not to do with yield. They're to do with demand and supply. And on that basis, gold is very attractive because mine production is declining in the long term. There's a lack of new discoveries of gold on the mining side, so you have a declining supply profile. And at the same time, as I said earlier, you've got strong demand at the moment. You've got strong demand in jewellery from Asian countries. And remember, throughout the whole credit crunch, China and India, for example, have continued to grow, and people have become wealthier in those countries, unlike in the West, where there's more of an issue with recession and with sovereign debt issues. So you're seeing jewellery demand remain very strong in Asia. That's driving the market.
Even in London, in the Indian Quarter, there are countless jewellery shops. India is the world's top consumer of gold at 440 tons in 2009, and that's counting jewellery alone. Private wealth in gold is quite considerable there.